Was Windows ME really that bad? Let's find out. Windows Millennium Edition, ME, was released in June of 2000 for release to manufacturer, RTM, and in September of 2000 for consumers. Intended to be an upgrade for users of Windows 98, Windows ME saw the introduction of some stuff we take for granted today, like the well-known System Restore utility. It also had the beloved Windows Movie Maker, and an improved version of Windows DVD Player, which now does not require a specific card decoder, but instead uses software through a third party to decode the disk, as well as system file protection, and a host of many other new features. However, the public massively disapproved and depreciated Windows ME, as users who upgraded from Windows 98 often had problems with either graphics or some other component that did not have the appropriate drivers written for the edition of Windows at the time. Windows Vista was somewhat similar 7 years later on, in the sense that it too had been rushed out to market and brought on significant issues for users back in the day, but that's a story for another video. Windows Millennium Edition was criticized for instability, bugginess, hardware incompatibility, and was overall a failure, which made Microsoft rush their next newest version of Windows in less than a year later. The legendary Windows XP was a massive success compared to Windows ME, and it was targeted at both home and business users. Windows ME was considered to be terrible by many. However, judging by my personal experience with it, I have only ever tested it in a virtual machine. However, when doing so, I never had any instability, crashes, bugginess, all the supposed issues people were having back in the day. But remember, using a VM only virtualizes the operating system. If you actually used Windows ME on hardware from around the Windows 98 days, you may have had issues due to driver incompatibility, and once again, it was a case of Microsoft rushing their product out to the market, which can sometimes be one of the worst things you can do, as you're not taking the time necessary to properly develop the software. So most users stuck with whatever they were using, until XP hit the scene later on down the track, although Windows 98 was still supported until around July 2006. Windows ME's extended support ended on July 11, 2006. The same day Windows 98 also lost support. Mainstream support had ended 3 years earlier for Windows ME. So, was Windows Millennium Edition really as bad as people say or claim it was? In my personal opinion, I think the hatred and criticism towards it was rather unnecessary and perhaps overwhelmingly confusing, because a lot of people who did not use ME were probably put off by the negative connotations surrounding it, which can put a lot of people off from upgrading to a newer system. However, with the many new features it introduced that we take for granted today, you cannot fault it completely, because it might have been a rushed release, but like Windows Vista, 8, and 11, they all still retain some good values, like new features and functionality not seen in previous versions of Windows. Of course, I hate Windows 11. I think 8 was definitely a letdown in terms of UI design for desktop users. Vista was definitely rushed to market due to the very long development process of it after XP was released. You probably know the whole Longhorn fiasco behind it, and ME just happens to fall into the so-called bad releases of Windows. However, I think this whole good-bad thing is nonsense. You cannot definitively say that a particular release is good or bad, although many consider certain versions to be good, and others to be bad. But what this really comes down to is the fact that Windows has always been for profit, not made by the people for the people, unlike Linux, which is completely the opposite. It is made by the people for the people, and profit is not always something they gain. So many developers heavily rely on donations to keep their projects alive. I much prefer a team of developers making a fantastic OS than a big tech company forcing you to upgrade your system to the not-so-latest and greatest version of Windows. Microsoft have always been doing shady business behind closed doors. They have been to court several times over several things, lawsuits and all, so is it any wonder their products aren't good, or at least are not as good as what they used to be? They have always served their users substandard quality software that does not perform efficiently, Meanwhile, Linux seems to make older hardware quite usable, so what's the go exactly? Well, Windows has the monopoly of the PC market. Pretty much every bit of software out there is written for Windows, lots of which is not compatible with Mac OS or Linux, or other operating systems, and as a result, people who want access to specific games or software do not have any choice but to use this substandard garbage. However, with the rising inequality in our world, Linux seems to be getting more attention than ever before, especially from poor people who cannot afford the latest hardware, or for those who lack any sort of significant income. However, Windows will continue to dominate the PC market for decades, if not centuries to come, by which we will all probably be gone, but our future generations will probably look back upon Microsoft and go, wow, they really were barbaric and evil, weren't they? Windows ME was a blessing and a curse, and Microsoft was too focused on getting the cash in their pocket, just like any corporation out there. But look at what happens, especially during a time period where computer hardware is making leaps and bounds in terms of development. When you rush products to market, you often end up with a product that is shit in quality and is non-functional, or at the very least, performs so poorly you might as well not bother with it, which is exactly what happened with Windows ME back in the day. What did you think of Windows ME? Did you like it or hate it? Let us all know what you think of Windows ME down in the comments section below. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you next video. Bye for now.